The following hour is brought to you by MidasResources.com. Call Midas Resources today to protect your future at 1-800-686-2237.
Welcome back, and we have our special team here. Preparedness, Civil Defense, MERS, the Middle East Respiratory Virus, H7N9, Ebola, martial law, the recent fall down of the military regimes in Iraq, with the Iraqi government under full attack, with the fall of several cities, now the latest being Mosul with ISIS, and now the entry of 4,000 plus Iranian troops trapped, contractors inside of Iraq. John, give us the latest report. What's going on? This is insanity, and we can't use our air attacks either.
Right. This is reported by Jerome Corsi at WorldNet Daily. As of 4 hours ago, 300 of the 400 American contractors at the Balad Air Force Base have been evacuated, going to Baghdad in C-130s. In the last couple of days, apparently these American contractors picked up guns abandoned by the Iraqi army, who dropped their guns and took off their uniforms. The Americans picked up the guns and set up a perimeter and were fighting for their lives. And now the Iraqi Air Force apparently is finally coming in to rescue them and take them down to Baghdad, right. Which might just be an interim step before they have to leave the country. Apparently, Americans are getting out of the country as quick as they can in general.
Right. Now, do you think who triggered this war? Do you think it was triggered by the clerics inside of Iraq, or do you think that the West had something to do with it?
Well, of course, there's a great lack of details, but we were warned 10 years ago that when we overthrew Saddam, not to take his army out of the picture, right. Which we did. They had a fully functioning army that was pretty much apolitical. They did not attack Christians and so forth. They were all forced into early retirement, and they attempted to recruit and train a new army, which apparently is proving to be a complete and dismal failure. Meanwhile, I believe that the main force of these attackers are, in fact, the remnants of that 700,000-man army that we disbanded when we attacked the country. Right. They've been lying in wait these last 10 years, training in secret, arming themselves in secret, equipping themselves in secret, and waiting for the time when they could strike. And now the time is now.
Right. And they know that America has no stomach for war, no finances for war, and certainly a weak president has no intention of putting troops back in to start a major conflict, which if it's an insurgency, you can't even use airstrikes because you'd kill a ton of civilians.
Right. Well, there's this column of vehicles that, moving south towards Baghdad that probably would be a pretty ripe target. If anybody comes to the aid of what's going on there, it would be Iran, because the people under attack are the same group, the Shiites, that comprise most of Iran. Right. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Iran stepping in there to help their brothers, as they consider them.
Exactly. Some of them are literally right across the border, and there's a number of holy cities that are literally right across the border in Iraq, where there's pilgrimages from Iran to Iraq every year. People don't know that.
Well, these holy sites, these Shiite holy sites, the Sunnis have declared publicly that they will just bulldoze them down, both the holy sites and the graves of these people that they hold in high regard.
Well, that means that Iran will be in it, and if Iran's in it, Russia's in it. This is not a minor thing, and it means also Syria and Hezbollah, which means that the war against Israel, and Israel wanted this war. They've been stupid as ever in their military strategy, and they've lost every time, going right back to 1982 with the war where they tried to attack Lebanon, and their recent wars against Lebanon have been a disaster. They went in there with their tanks and thought, we got these big Israeli tanks, and then the Hezbollah had tank-killing handheld missiles that would blow the tanks all to pieces. So they realized the helicopters and tanks are being blown to pieces, and they had no ability to go in there and do what they wanted to do. They thought, well, we've got all these fancy weapons. No, you don't anymore. You don't have asymmetric superiority anymore. It's gone.
There was a time in the 70s when there was a lot of debate in various military circles that the role of the modern infantryman was dead. But at about the same time, very efficient and very powerful handheld weapons were being deployed.
Exactly, like special missiles and rocket-propelled grenades and all kinds of stuff. So this idea that the infantryman is gone is a pile of garbage, especially with these super weapons now.
Right. So the one man can be armed with incredibly powerful handheld weapons that can take out a tank or take out a helicopter. So getting back to the subject at hand, we need to look at who the players are, who supports them, and Russia is going to support Iran.
Right.
Iran's been a client state of Russia for quite a while, and even more so Syria. Syria's been a client state of Russia for decades. The first, what I call a first-tier client state, that's been getting, Saddam Hussein's MiG fighters were buried in the sand for lack of spare parts and technicians. Syria has MiG fighters that actually do fly as well, and so does Iran.
And they have parts.
And they have spare parts, and they have technicians.
Right.
If you don't, and logistics is key when it comes to these sophisticated weapon systems. If you don't have technicians from the factory that builds these aircraft and daily, if not weekly, flights of spare parts, they simply don't fly very long.
And the MiG-29I and the latest versions of the Russian jets are far superior to our JL's 35 Joint Strike Fighter. This is a piece of garbage. It's a flying dinosaur.
The F-35 couldn't even fly in the rain. I don't know, did they even get that fixed? I mean,
no. They had the composite material flying off in the engine parts. They had too small aerofoil to actually do the computer designed flight pathways. Everything is screwed up on this fighter, and it costs a fortune to make them. They're a dinosaur, and you don't want to put them into battle because older Russian jets going back to the 50s and 60s can beat them in an airstrike, in a dogfight. So I think that we are insane to think that we're going to prosecute a war against Syria. What we're going to find is we're going to get our butts kicked. Here's what I would expect. In the first 24 hours, any of our boats sitting out there within 180 miles of the coast of Syria will be going to the bottom with the Yukon hypersonic cruise missiles and Hoot supercavitation torpedoes. The Alexander, we have long-term missiles as well that the Syrians have that can go anywhere from 400 to 500 miles. The Iranians have missiles that will go 3,000 to 4,000 miles, so they can strike any city inside Europe and any base in the United States. They have missile guidance systems and satellite uplinks, so they can hit accurately. And they also have stolen and gotten all our drones because we flew the drones over, and they actually took over control of them, and they've completely cloned all our drones. So the most advanced drones made here in San Diego County, the Iranians have, and these are not stupid people. They know their back is against the wall. They've been scrambling for years since the Iran-Iraq war, and if we think we're going to waltz in and take them, we're nuts. We're absolutely nuts. We're going to find out that most of our military will be degraded to make it a third world army and navy after they crunch us to pieces. Between Russia, Syria, Iran, and of course what's going to go happen in Ukraine is insanity. The idea that we're going to waltz in there and we're basically NATO. I mean, the Europeans aren't going to contribute much. They're ridiculous. They don't have any military forces. They're a joke.
No, and it's been that way for decades. We had token help during these wars from...
The same with the Canadians. The Canadians don't have any military force. They've got a tinker toy force that can supply our ships while we're out there in the battlefield. That's it.
Right. So, and if something comes up, if we do go to war again, it'll be the same thing. A token amount of troops from England and Canada and France and Germany and so forth, that won't amount to anything.
It'll get bad enough that we're going to require a draft. If they have a draft and you have a draft military force, it doesn't work. Draft forces do not have the military drive, the training, and the will to fight when it's blood and guts.
Well, the draftees in Vietnam performed quite well on one hand. On the other, a new draft will include women, and that's borne out. Well, every post office in the United States has these selective service registration cards and in the top middle part of the card for the youngster.
Of corporate America, we're the place for independent thinkers. GCN.
Welcome back, and the latest I want to change the topic just a bit and to get your response, John and Ann, is that Obama has literally certified hundreds of thousands of people with previous criminal records to be released on the streets. He's also allowed Mexican children and children from Mexico and other Central and South American countries to just be dumped across the border and to not deport them. So we're having a massive flush of children into Texas and other border states. We have a disaster brewing, and I think this is a prelude to an economic collapse and to the forced North American Union with the MARIAL, which we've talked about for years, which is the currency that popped out about 5-6 years ago, plus, and they're ready to do it. They want to make America just part of Trade Zone 3 on a 10-zone world. John, and your comments.
Well, Doctor, let's look at the logistics of children getting from Mexico or Guatemala or Honduras into the United States. This is something children can't do on their own. They're children.
No, they're children, yeah.
Which means there's somebody providing food, shelter, transportation, sanitation, to move these children hundreds, if not thousands of miles from one part of South America or Mexico to the United States border. This is something that it takes a lot of planning, a lot of resources in order to pull it off. These children aren't doing this on their own, far from it. This is an organized effort by people who have financial wherewithal to make it happen. And so you look at why would people spend the money to bring children across this border and dump them in Arizona and Texas and New Mexico? Well, there's an agenda there, and I think you touched on it very clearly there a few minutes ago. There's an agenda to overwhelm and overload all the normal facilities to take care of these illegal alien children to the point where it's the government is prohibiting our legislators from taking photographs even. And right ahead on Drudge right now, Obama administration forbids lawmakers from taking photographs of illegal immigrant facility. They're fearful that the word will get out about how miserable this has become because everything is just simply overwhelmed. And this, we don't know, how long this is going to go on. The chances of some of these children getting sick or dying or coming to the country already sick and spreading more disease is very great, very great. There's no doubt in my mind.
Yeah, a lot of these children are going to be carrying Chagas disease, Hansen's disease, which is leprosy. They're going to be carrying tuberculosis, all kinds of different bugs, and of course they don't have time to properly, put them through a process to vet them, make sure they don't have infections, clear the infections up. What they're doing is they're overloading the services, and Obama's directly behind it. It's like, this isn't nice to the children. It's not nice to allow to greenlight it. Obviously, down in Central and South America and Mexico, they've greenlighted that Obama basically has an open door. When you let 70,000 plus people right off the bat and a few 100,000 more that are proven felons, that have criminal records, proven felons in America, etc., and then they don't deport them. I mean, this is again the so-called Department of Justice with Eric Holder. This guy is a criminal. When I look at this guy's face, you just look like, yeah, I'm a criminal. What are you going to do about it? Kind of look. It's like, what are we doing? How come Congress just doesn't kind of take these guys and say, time to zip tie you boys? Obama, you're going into a cell. Holder, you're going to a cell. We're going to have a military tribunal because this is treason. These guys are treasonous. And the thing is, it's not nice to greenlight the parents and say you can drop your kids off. And then what are they going to do? Let the parents in later? Our services can't handle it. And I think it's all designed to say, look, we're going to make this just one big trade zone. And of course, the Canadians are stupid, too, because they don't realize they're going to get dumped. They won't just dump in America. A lot of these are going to end up in Canada as well. they're going to get overwhelmed with services up there. They think, oh, yeah, you poor America, it's tough on you. No. You're going to end up in Winnipeg and Nova Scotia and Newfoundland and British Columbia. You're going to get lumped with a lot of these people. Are going to end up in your towns and cities all over the place. And if you think you can be smug about it up there, don't, because this globalist plan is to screw everybody. It's not just to screw America.
Well, Doctor, we're truly in perilous times. And, I'm not aware of any country doing what we're doing and surviving as a culture and as a country, because this is threatening our culture. It is threatening the integrity of our country, being a country. If you don't have borders that are recognizable and protected, well, you're not a country anymore. And
No. Well, that's what they want to do, is make it not a country. See, he promised to make America a post-colonial kingdom. And it says Obama administration forbids lawmakers from taking photos of illegal immigrant facility. Who the heck does he think he is? That he can actually literally close off? He said, I'm going to be an open administration. Obama is the most closed administration that has ever been in America. It's ridiculous. The most closed administration ever. And people think, well, this is just optional. It's the same thing with health care. I mentioned it the other day.
I think the White House is still off limits for tours, isn't it?
I think so, yeah.
It was. I don't know if they've reopened it or not. There was never an explanation why, to my knowledge.
Well, what I see happening is, and I've been looking at some numbers too. It looks to me like the financial wall is going to be hit shortly, sometime this year. I can't say when, but it looks like this year. It looks like the war wall. We're already well into it. We're aggravating and trying to start a little Middle Eastern war in Iraq, and our policies are catastrophic. So, America is going to probably start dumping more troops back in there. They'll apologize themselves and do another war conflict. If Iran moves in there, they're not just going to support the Iraqis that are Shiite. They're going to start annexing territory, because that's effectively what Iran's going to do. Because as they move in there and they knock back the civil insurgency of ISIS, because the Iranians have some very serious Republican Guard troops, and they've not been degraded like Iraq.
Right.
So that means in the next year or two, you're going to see huge chunks of eastern Iraq are going to be absorbed into Iran. That's going to really inflame the situation, especially now that the Kurds have taken Kirkuk in northern Iraq. That's gone. So Iraq is going to shrink into a tiny little segment of what's left of primarily Sunni Islam. And the Saudi Arabians, who've been aggravating all this stuff and pushing for the troops and supplying arms to the so-called insurgents of ISIS, they're getting themselves closer and closer to a really major conflict with Iran. And as it says in the Bible, it says in the it actually has a prophecy that Western Iran, or Elam, will burn the city of the kingdom of the burden of the desert by the sea, which is the Red Sea. That's Saudi Arabia. It says it right in the Bible. So I think you're going to see Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and many other places in Iran, in Saudi Arabia, fried by Iran, i.e. with Russian help. The Saudi Arabians are just asking for it. They really are. They're behind all these conflicts in Syria. They're behind the war in Iraq. They were involved directly with 9/11, along with the dancing Israelis. I mean, it was Saudi agents and Israeli agents that put those micro-nukes in there, dancing and photographing the destruction of the trade towers. We know that it was Saudis.
More coming out on micro-nukes, by the way. It's becoming more public all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I have all the data, too, yeah. You've been following it well now, John.
The nation's largest independently owned and operated talk radio network. The Genesis Communications Network. GCN.
Welcome back, and I'd like you to comment on the report that was referred to, Judge. It was actually in Good Morning America. It says, solar flares disrupt communications on Earth, could send shockwave on Friday the 13th. And there are 3 major flares that occurred, actually. So what's happening? Any reports on that, of what's happened and what's going to happen?
Yeah, those were X-class flares. I think there was an X1.2 and an X1.1, and then 2 days later there was an X1.0.
Right.
The first 2, one came from the edge of the sun as it's rotating onto the solar disk, and the other one came from the center of the solar disk. And those two CMEs merged. They called it a cannibalistic merging. In other words, one absorbed the other. And it looks like it's not going to directly hit the Earth, but there's going to be a glancing blow. And they didn't say whether it was going to be in the south and the north, but since the sun is now above the equator, I would think it would be in the northern hemisphere.
Right.
And those CMEs came in, or they should be here today.
Yes.
And I haven't heard of any communication problems. When the flare went off, they measured ground currents, and they measured disruptions to certain bands of radio. So maybe there were some communication disruptions, but those ground currents, there were reports of power outages across the country with no explanation given on what happened. So I suspect that those ground currents probably tripped the transformers that sit at substations.
Yeah, and I think that what we should be aware of is that during these quiet times of the sun, there's much more likelihood of storms. The approach of we call Planet X or Planet 10, which is literally a red dwarf star, is coming in. John, I want you to comment, because I believe all the signs continue to show that there's going to be increasing levels of these superstorms, not only on the sun, but the red dwarf star itself can generate superstorms itself that can have a horrible effect on our geomagnetosphere and power substations. And the most likely thing is satellite communications go first, secondly power substations, then home communications, etc., and then the very last thing are cars, because they're grounded, they're sitting on tires. So, right. And people say, well, this can't happen. And yes, it can. 1989, Quebec, Canada, was one-third the power of the Carrington event. It caused a power substation blackout along the James Bay Hydro Project. And if you've ever been in northern Quebec, which I have, it's giant. You could drop half of the United States into northern Quebec and it would disappear. It's big. And this hydro project is the largest one on the planet, except for the one they're trying to build in China. And when the power lines were all connected, because they weren't kind of strung out and kind of separated so they would block a power line, it blew them lines all to hell. And literally, there was so much energy that any of the trees down below these power lines were fried literally by the power energy picked up by these lines from space, from the coronal mass ejection. So I think that power, by the way, was out for a long time. It took a long time for those power lines to be replaced, months and months. That's with all the chain of production and distribution where we still made these step-down transformers in America. They're not made here anymore. They're made in China. So, John, your comments, because I think we are looking, and I don't want to talk about Ed Dames and his kill shot thing, because I think he's kind of making a big business out of this. But a kill shot's coming. And a kill shot means that we're going to have, if you don't have Faraday cages covering your things, if you're not prepared for the fact that communications could go down for a long time, you're not prepared for being shoved not back into the 20th century, but the Stone Age, plus a lot of bad things happening. In other words, the Stone Age will seem like the Sandals Resort compared to where we're going if the power goes out. It'll be a lot worse. You imagine
people in the Stone Age had skills that modern people simply don't possess.
Exactly.
And they had the skills to survive with what was at hand, which was wild edibles, fabricating tools out of sticks and stones, literally, and whatever animals they could capture and skin.
Right.
So there's 0.1% of 1% of American adults have those skills, and that might be optimistic. So it won't be going back to the 1890s. It won't be Little House on the Prairie. It won't be the Stone Age. It'll be a cataclysm. Because
hey, I got a new term for you, John. You can use on your show too. Let's call it the barbecue age, where basically everybody will be roasted in their front lawn with an apple in their mouth on a spit, because it'll be that bad they'll be literally cannibalizing, because the only fresh meat will be basically people.
The long pig, as they say in Africa.
Yeah, the long pig in China, yeah. So people say, oh, Dr. Deagle, you're just exaggerating. I say, no. I worked with the government, and we were told at the Federal Center when we were doing our war game simulations at the Federal Center in Denver with the CDC and the FBI, that between the 4th and the 11th day, gangs and civilian militia will take over everything. Not the military. Military will join either the gangs or civilian, most likely civilian. The police, the firefighters, everybody, retired doctors like me will join the civilian militia. And the fact is, foreign troops on our soil mean nothing. They're zero. They're nada. They mean nothing. I don't care if there's 500,000 of them. Who cares? They'll either join the militia or the gangs, or they will be exterminated. That's it. And there's a lot of gangs. If you go up to Los Angeles, like 100,000 gangs. Okay, 100,000 gangs in the greater Los Angeles area. So this idea that we're going to have a martial law, we hear some various, I'm not going to mention who they are, but people that mention that martial law is coming and so on. No, the best they can do in martial law is to put black ski mask guys with flak jackets on and tanks, let's say, near the bank. But if they ever start killing people or doing stuff, they'll be exterminated so quick they can't even imagine how fast. That's why anybody with brains that's in Special Forces or Delaware or SWAT teams don't want to start seizing guns from veterans. They have two clues. They realize they're going to die real fast once they start attacking the civilians. The same thing in Iraq. You can't put down a civilian insurgency. You got 10 or 20 million people that are mad as hell and carrying weapons. You think you're going to put that down? You're crazy. The only way to put it down is to actually drop a nuke and kill everybody. That'll put it down. But you mean you don't have any left. You kill everybody. You cannot put down a civilian insurgency. It's not possible.
No. There's no precedence for a country as well armed as the United States of America being overwhelmed.
Or even Iraq. The Iraqis have built up weapons over the last 10 years. They're not going to be put down. This is going to get really, really, really ugly. And there's no saying you can't use regular fancy weapons in space. We're going to put drones in there and blast them. We're going to drop bombs on them. No, you can't. Everybody is. Who's a civilian? Who's a militia? Who's this insurgent? I mean, how do you tell? You can't tell. You're going along, if your special forces going along the back of some back alley and somebody reaches out of the bedroom window or a bathroom window and boom, 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 blows your brains against the wall. It's not possible. And, these pinheads like Obama and the people that war game this old thing, well, yeah, we can do this. No, you can't do this. I don't care how many drones and fancy missiles and space-based weapons you have. Your only solution is to nuke everybody and kill everyone. And that's not rational. Because if you start an asymmetric war with people like this, they will release their asymmetric weapons, or biological weapons, and other things, and you're done. Because they have enough, just in Iraq, they have enough biological weapons, and Syria. Syria and Iran have been sequestering the weapons developed at the BioPrePAREDNESS program in Russia for 75, 80 years. They have total collaboration. They're scientists and biological weapons people. I personally saw requisitions to Saddam Hussein of Ebola, of every kind of bioweapon you can imagine, weaponized anthrax, everything you can imagine, shipped over with the actual certificates. I saw the FedEx certificates shipped over to Saddam Hussein before the Iran-Iraq war, because he was on our side. He was our bad dog. So this idea that they're not going to have weapons of mass destruction, we're nuts.
Absolutely.
We're nuts.
Well, we've been talking about this Middle East thing for quite a while, Doctor, but what's happening in Iraq is going to come to a head very, very quickly. It's right now, I got a time zone thing here in front of me, it's 12:36 a.m. Local time Baghdad right now.
Right.
So in about 6 or 7 hours, I expect they'll be back at it. And, of course, overnight they might be consolidating gains also.
Okay, well, here's the latest report I have on Drudge. Baghdad's falling as we speak right now. Exodus as chaos spreads. 800,000 refugees. Christians on the run. Medieval Sharia law imposed. Roads lined with decapitated police and soldiers. Iraqi government paralyzed. Iran to the rescue. Video thousands of soldiers captured. Report 200 American contractors surrounded by jihadists. Vets watch as insurgents undo sacrifices. What was the point? It's like punch in the gut. Oil soars. That's the quote straight from Drudge right now. And guess who's silent? W stays silent.
The golfer in the Oval Office.
Yeah, Oval Office guy. The Abominator.
If you're going to take just one... I remember when I lost my mind. There was something so pleasant about...
Welcome back, and let's touch on MERS and what's going on with the Middle East respiratory virus. There's a clear pipeline, apparently, according to Henry L. Nyman over at Recombionomics.com, between Saudi Arabia and Jordan. There's hot spots in Germany and elsewhere in Spain. This is not going to stop. It's going to continue smoldering and bubbling. We also have H7N9 in China that spread to Vietnam and other countries. We have Ebola that's still, the level of incompetency in dealing with Ebola is monumental. And we don't even have the proper equipment being shipped to the people to maintain what we call reverse protection so the health professionals don't get infected and die. So all of these things are end-time plagues. They're taking off, and God knows when they're going to actually become catastrophic. But if we go to the state of economic chaos and war, it's going to get considerably worse before it becomes catastrophic.
Well, the problem, with Ebola is that, for instance, they have secret societies in the west part of Africa, and probably throughout Africa, and the native peoples, and they are responsible for some of the burial and the birthing and the medicine. They're like witch doctors or whatever.
Right.
And they traced 36 deaths to one of these people. She wasn't convinced that her medicines didn't work, and so she spread it to the families, and the families spread it to their cousins.
Oh, my.
36 people died from that one person. So, and that's the way, we're very fortunate to have a national health system. I mean, we do have the CDC, and it is working with the World Health Organization. I do have to mention that as far as MERS coronavirus goes, we now have two different standards. The CDC position is that you have to have close personal contact with somebody that has MERS in order to catch it. And the European position is that, no, it just takes close contact, either in a business setting or a social setting. And by that they mean conversation for greater than 15 minutes. And no, it doesn't involve handshaking or anything like that. It's just close contact. So we have two different standards now, and the conservative approach is the European approach, and the CDC is, well, they're fanning the flames, I guess. It's definitely smoldering here in the United States. We've had two cases that have flown in from the Saudi Arabian Peninsula, and this was after they had been caught in the contact net. In other words, they were contacts of people who had died from MERS coronavirus, and they had, they were being contacted, and apparently they both had reported sniffles, a mild case of sniffles one day, but they were not called in or tested out for that. And then they flew into the United States, and they developed the full-blown MERS coronavirus.
So what we see is that between now and the fall, the high likelihood of the MERS getting embedded in the United States, in the midst of an economic chaos, an expanding war in the Middle East, a conflict between Russia. Russia, by the way, is doing everything it can to completely sidestep and to withdraw from the dollar, which means that they're attacking this great force, the petrodollar, which is about 1/3 of all currency traded in the world every day. You destroy the petrodollar, and the American currency is going to start collapsing. And already, there's not enough cash credit, and we call cash flow the velocity of money, to maintain our control of the world currency. And this means we're going to have a disaster probably sometime this year. What I suspect is that America will pull out all the stops, because ultimately, and I've said this before, the mark of the beast comes from America. It comes from Colorado Springs. Schriever Air Force Base is a central node. Yeah, they got some databases in Bluffdale, Utah. But the central node, and this is at Schriever Air Force Base, is a supercomputer array of Cray 4 and Cray 5 quantum computers that have set up a virtual world copy like the Matrix. And their plan is to have biometric currency with authentication. Everybody can see this coming. I mean, it's not like I invented it, but I can give them the specifics like nobody else. Right down to the exact details of what's going on. There's literally not a person who's ever lived knows more about the specific details of how they're going to implement and the technology of the mark of the beast.
Well,
and that's coming real quickly. And I can't tell you when, but I can tell you technically what they're going to do. And it's going to come from America. And this crisis right now is going to lead to it. It's going to lead to a biometric authentication currency to replace the current mess and to create a whole new game for the globalist banksters. That's why they have negative interest for bank-to-bank loans in Europe, which means you got to pay to deposit money. And I heard that one of the major banks, I'm trying to think which one it is now charging customers here and in Europe to put deposits. I think it's 25 cents on $100 for small deposits, but if it's large, it's much bigger. I think it's I'm trying to remember which bank it is, but it's one of the major ones. And that means that we're getting into this new zone where negative interest means an asset bubble, according to Gerald Celente. That means that at some point this asset bubble is going to burst because they can't even make money on derivatives, and it's probably going to be this year. And that's perfectly timed with the blood moons. We have the Passover blood moon that happened. We have the next one is the blood moon that deals with Sukkot, which is coming up this fall. I think it's October 8th. And next year we have the Passover again, and then we have the final, which is the Feast of Sukkot, which is not only 2 weeks before a full solar eclipse over Jerusalem and Israel, and then a full supermoon, blood moon over Jerusalem on the 28th of September next year, 2015. And it turns out it's the end of what's called a Shemitah year. And a Shemitah year means it's the last of the 7th year of forgiveness, basically when debts and other things are forgiven. It's the start of another 7-year period, and of course that's the exact length of time of the period that the rabbis are called for, right from Daniel, for the 7-year period of reconciliation of the so-called peace treaty. And they cannot do a sacrifice unless it's on a Sukkot day right after the end of the Shemitah year. That means fall of 2015 is the first potential date when a 7-year treaty could start.
Well, I just want to mention with this MERS coronavirus is that it's smoldering here in the United States, and I calculated out the number of people who might be infected over the next 18 months, and it's in the millions by the time you get to the 18th month.
You mentioned some very important things, Ann, so tell us about them, because you mentioned about transplants and other things. Tell us more.
Yeah, it has a 30% fatality rate, so you may survive it. I mean, you probably will survive it, but you may not recover from it because it will damage the kidneys and the lungs and other organs. So there's going to be a huge need for kidneys to be transplanted. And how they're going to fill that need, the greedy people get what they want, and that leaves the rest of us.
Well, third world people in China where you're tissue typed as soon as you go into a Laodai prison camp. And of course, these illegal aliens are brought into the country. They can tissue type all these children. And the illegals, as soon as they come in, a lot of them are going to be put in civil detention because they don't have enough regular facilities. So you got millions of facilities available through civil detention camps. They're already pre-built. So maybe the purpose that they're bringing all these illegals and children in is that they sequester. And I talked to Alexander Bachman, and he mentioned if he actually applied for citizenship in America, even though he was raised in Coronado, so that's near San Diego, and he moved to Mexico because he's originally Swedish in nationality, but he's Mexican and worked in the Mexican army and everything, that if he immigrated to America, they would put him and his family into a civil detention camp for a year. That's what they told him. So I think they're getting ready to open up these camps.
Camps located?
They're located everywhere, from Pendleton Marine Corps Base to places all over. There's 8 really big ones and a whole bunch of little ones, but they're all over the place. And potentially they could hold millions of people. But I think they're designed to hold all these people they're flushing into the country, and they're all ready. I mean, they have everything from little churches to educational school buildings to places to eat and exercise. They get it all set up. It took them years to do it, but they're ready. So I think they want to start activating these civil detention prison camps, and they're going to bring in these illegals and then kind of say they're going to vet them through this process. This is what I suspect is coming, and it's part of the process of amalgamating us with Canada and Mexico. That's why they've rationalized social services and health care, because when you look at Obamacare, it'll be very simple in the next year or two. Most regular insurance is going to go belly up, and the government will be in total control of health care, and it'll be easy to amalgamate it with Mexican and American insurance with a few little tweaks here and there. Before you know it, you got one big supranation, kind of Mexico.
Well, dark times are coming. I still tell people, dig fast, dig deep.
What are your comments, John?
Well, this is the time to get your spiritual house in order and get your preparations done ASAP, Doctor.
Absolutely, and of course we're back on Monday with John for a big prepper school hour. And any special comments on any other diseases or things going on? These CMEs may hit today, we don't know, but we know the big one's coming. If you're not protecting yourself in your communications, don't be surprised if the CME knocks out the power and the ability to have cell phones, etc. We're on the way to a kill shot, but I don't know if I want to believe the so-called info from Ed Dames. Thank you, everybody. Take care and take action.
All right.
We appreciate all your orders of Nutrimeds. Get your Nutrimed orders in today. We need your support. Take care.
Henry Ford once said, a man who stops advertising to save money is like a man who stops the clock to save time. Alex